One episode was just not enough. On today's show, Jeff Svoboda is back, and the kids are all right. We're talking about that, plus the big summer coming up for the Blue Jackets on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Now, yesterday we talked a lot with Jeff Svoboda at Jackets Insider about last season, how it went. We talked about the new guys, the new coach, the new GM. We talked about how great Sean Monahan is and how much we love him. But today, Jeff's back, and we are talking about the kids. We're talking about how Adam Fantilli had his sophomore season, and it was a thrilling triumph. We're talking about Kirill Marchenko and the season he had and how he just took off like a rocket. We're talking about maybe the most underrated of the young core in Cole Sillinger. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit about the big summer coming up for the Blue Jackets and some thoughts on what this team could do to make themselves into a playoff team this time next year. So I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Jeff. But I want to talk about his influence on specifically Adam Fantilli, because I think that was also a really big part of why they signed him. You know, and you talk about these young guys with so much potential, but they've got to learn from someone. Right. And I was trying to think, and like, Monahan might be, I think, the best veteran top six center that the Blue Jackets have had in quite a long time. Right. Because, you know, Boone Jenner, who did a fine job at the role, but I think is a winger naturally and has played wing for a lot of his career. Sean Monahan is a natural center who has always played center. But then you look before that and you're like, well, before that, your number one center was Pierre-Luc Dubois. And then before that would have been Ryan Johansson, probably. How important is having someone like Monahan around for, you know, guys like Adam Fantilli, guys like Cole Sillinger? I know Kent Johnson plays a lot of wing now, but again, someone like Kent Johnson, just having someone around who has played the position for, 10 years now in the NHL?
Yeah.
You think that adds to Fantilli's leap forward?
Yeah, and Adam talked about it a lot throughout the season was, you know, as a young guy, you come in and you want to go 100 miles per hour at all times to kind of prove the effort that you're giving. And that's probably what you're used to doing, you know, especially, you know, when you're come in as that high of a draft pick and, you know, you're expected to be, you know, one of the best players on the team. You've been the best player on your team your entire life. You know, you have that burden on you of expectations. And so you want to come in and show, I'm going 100 miles per hour from point A to point B. And Adam talked a lot about, you know, he watched Sean Monahan and realized like that, you don't have to do that. Like, you know, you can be a better player by doing same level of effort, but by doing less. You know, let the game come to you a little bit instead of trying to force yourself onto the game. And so, you know, Adam talked about that was one of the reasons he was a better player this year. Is he watched Sean Monahan and realized like, okay, I don't have to play like my hair's on fire. There are certain moments where you do, but you know, you have to read the game and you know, let it come to you just as much as you trying to impress yourself on it. So. Yeah, from an on-ice standpoint, I think you could see that in Adam's game as the year went on. Adam talked about it quite a bit. And then, as I said, the locker room part of it, you know, you always hear coaches talk about guys who are great pros because, you know, they set the example of how you're supposed to carry yourself and the things you need to do, you know, in this league to be successful for a long time. And, you know, Zach Werenski is a great example of that. But Sean Monahan is as well. And I think for those forwards, it really is huge. You know, when you can hear about it and you can think about what you think is what you have to do. But then when you see a guy who's having the success that he's having and you see the way he does things on a daily basis, I think it means a lot to an organization and a lot to a young player. So, yeah, I think that it's fair to say that, you know, if they didn't have a Sean Monahan, that, you know, would Adam Fantilli have grown the way he did this year? Probably not. And that's what Adam would say. So who might argue with that? but yeah, I think it really goes a long way. And just what it did to the lineup too. I mean, you could put him in that number one center role and, you know, then you could put Adam, you know, even though he's projects as a number one center at some point, you know, he's 20 years old. he can not feel the pressure of having to carry the team, continue to learn on the job, and it gives you a pretty good 1-2 punch. And then, Sean can play in all situations as well. Good face-off guy, which is something I think is important as well. It just filled out their lineup, and you mentioned Boone, can put Boone back on the wing. Like, it just made the lineup make a lot more sense. And I think that was something that also helped them win games, is that it was a stabilizing force that was kind of something they could build around when they're putting together a lineup on a nightly basis. And so, yeah, but just in any way you slice it, it's really incredible what Sean Monahan did for this team. And I think you're going to look back and say that's kind of one of the transformative moves that this team makes as they, try to become a team that's competing for the Stanley Cup every year.
Talking about Adam Fantilli, he had kind of a slow start to the season, and then about halfway through, which it was probably around the time that Sean Monahan got injured, actually, he just took off like a rocket and had, I think 7 goals in his first 42 games and then 23 in his second half of the season, or something insane like that. Is that just like obviously he played with different players, but is it just something clicked? Do you think that it's, what do you think the secret is to Adam Fantilli just kind of taking off halfway through the season?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if there's like one answer to that question. I mean, I feel like part of it was watching someone like Monahan play, the first half of the season. Part of it was maybe the opportunity that then came along when Monahan gets hurt and Adam feels like he has to step up and, fill his shoes, and had the opportunity to play with, the Kirill Marchenko and Dmitry Vronkov, who both had great years. And part of it's just, getting used to being in the league. And you forget that Adam missed all that time his first season. He got to the middle of his season this year, and he still only played less than 100 NHL games. And so, there is a process of kind of learning the game, and, just guys naturally getting better the more experience that they gain. And I think all of that kind of came together to where, the natural talent took over for Adam as the year went on. That we knew it was in there. There's a reason he's the number 3 overall draft pick. The guy can score. The guy has offensive ability. But you get to the NHL level, and he's 19 his first year. He was 20 last year. You're playing against guys that have been in this league for 10, 15 years. Especially if you're on a top 2 line. You're going to have to play against the Sidney Crosbys and the Austin Matthews and all the top centers across the league. There's a learning curve there. And I think that he just got more comfortable and got more time under his belt and gained those experiences. And, he put in the work too. He spent this past offseason training with, we had the story go up about how he spent part of last summer with McKinnon and Crosby, learning from them. He spent a lot of the summer with Zach Werenski, learning from him. I think he is someone who's smart enough to, have an open mind and have open eyes as to watching those types of players and seeing what he can learn from them and then applying that on the ice. And so I think it all just kind of came together. He was obviously red hot at the end of the year. So, there's maybe a little bit of, if you score 23 or 24, whatever it was in your last 40 games, there's maybe a little bit of luck there. But he's also an incredibly talented hockey player. So it's probably not a huge surprise that, he has that ability to score that way. So, it'll be interesting to see exactly what, he becomes next year, because I think, as we, you say, once you've done it once, the expectations are you can do it again. And that's still asking a lot of a 21-year-old. But again, he was a high draft pick. He has all the skill in the world. He has the work ethic, and, he has the maturity and the mentality you need to be really good at this level. So, I think.
For pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. They're one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling fuller for longer. I am a gremlin, so I love that they do a no shells variety. It means that I can eat them, 14 at a time, or just sit there and pour the open bag into my mouth while I am watching whatever TV show I am currently obsessively watching. But if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite as well. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
If you look around at all these talented young players the Blue Jackets have brought in, all these high draft picks they've had the last couple of years that have started to make their mark at the NHL level, I think you could argue no one is more important to this team becoming a good team than Adam Fantilli. He's the highest draft pick of that group. He was number 3 overall. He's a center, which is a premium position. He's kind of the you get picked in that situation, you're expected to be an impact player. And so for Adam to have the second half of the season that he had is really encouraging and really important going forward, because, when you get picked there, you have to be that guy at some point. And so for him to start looking like that guy so early in his career is a huge piece of the puzzle for the Blue Jackets. And he has to keep it going as he goes forward in his career. But would you bet against him? I wouldn't.
Not after we got to 2 weeks left in the season and he hit 25 goals, and I was like, he might hit 30 goals this season. And then he had two goal games back to back or something, or two goal games in the space of 3 games or something insane like that. I was like, oh, okay, he's hitting 30, which is a lot of fun. I want to talk about our other 30 goal scorer, Kirill Marchenko, who just seems to get better and better every time you look at him. Like, obviously, for his rookie season, he has that insanely hilarious stat line of 21 goals and 4 assists.
Yes.
Next season, he figures out assists. This season, he becomes maybe one of the best 2-way wings in the game this season, I think. And he was a second-round draft pick. How important to this team's future is Kirill Marchenko, and how expected was this season that he had? Because he, again, just shot off like a rocket. I think he improved on his career high by 40 points or something wild like that. Obviously hit 30 goals for the first time. Is this the Kirill Marchenko that we should just kind of expect from now on?
Yeah, we hope so. But yeah, I mean, if you look at it, and you're right, it is funny to follow his career progression, because when he came in, he was a goal scorer, and that's all he was, and he's a darn good goal scorer as well. And then they say that second year, he joked, when he started getting assists, he's like, I am playmaker now, but then this year, second player in CBJ history to have at least 30 goals and 40 points or 40 assists in a season. Nick Foligno was the only other player to do that. It kind of seems like, if you look at the history of the Jackets, you either had, the Panarins and the Gaudreaus, who were like the assist guys, or you had, Rick Nash, who was a goal guy. But, you say Nick was the only guy, previous to this to have 30 goals and 40 assists. And Kirill did that. And it's a real testament to, just how much he builds his game. And, you see the Kirill that's, the smiles and, the levity in the locker room and the jokes and stuff. But I think sometimes he gets a little bit lost how much he works on the game. Pretty much every practice, he's out there early, he's out there late, working on his game, working on specific things, trying to get better. So I think we really saw him. He's become a leader in that regard. I think he's someone that at practice, if they're struggling with a drill, or if Dimitri doesn't understand English and he has to explain it to him, Kirill is the guy that gets the group together and says, no, we're not doing this right. Here's what we have to do. Or he's the guy that says, Voro, you're doing it wrong. Here's what you have to do. He's the guy that after practice is getting the power play guys together and saying, hey, what if we did this? If they're struggling on the power play, he's the guy that, wants them to get better, wants them to put in that extra work to do that. And so I think, like I say, everyone wants to talk about the laughs and the smiles and the gregarious nature of Kirill. But I think that sometimes overshadows just how seriously he takes the game and how much he wants to get better. And I remember talking to him at the end of the year about, his off season, and he was like, I took 2-3 weeks off and I got back to work. It's work. I want to get better. I want to be, a guy who is thought of as one of the best players in the NHL. And, there was the joke he kind of said at the end of the year where someone asked him, you've got 30 goals this year, but how many goals do you want to get in the season? And he asked, who has the most goals in the season? And then we're like, Gretzky had 92. And he was like, okay, I'll take 93. 31 to 93 would be a pretty big jump. It's gonna be hard to get 93, but that is his attitude. Is he talks all the time. He wants to be the best, and he puts in the work, and you see it in his game as it progresses year by year. So full credit to Marchie. He's not just a guy that shows up and wants to score goals and laugh about it. He's a very serious player when it comes down to it, and you can see that improvement in his game year to year. And if he gets even better next year, then watch out, because it would be really fun to watch.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, I wouldn't be mad about 93 goals from Kirill Marchenko, but I think if we start at 40 and then go from there, right? I want to talk about every player on the roster, and we simply can't do that because we only have so much time. But I want to talk about one more young player, and it's a guy that I don't think kind of gets lost in the mix of all of these, your 20 goal scorers, your 30 goal scorers, your future 1C in Adam Fantilli. Cole Sillinger, to me, had a very quiet, very good season. He didn't put up the points the way that Adam Fantilli did, but I thought he grew as a player massively. And he seems to be becoming kind of one of the younger leaders in the room. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And you're right. I think if you kind of look at some of the things he does away from the puck, and not that he's, not talented enough to score, but you were right in the fact that he grew in that way this season. And yeah, you saw him sticking up for teammates. You saw him, answering the bell when it needed to be done. It's a guy that understands hockey. He's grew up around hockey. He spent his entire life in hockey. His whole family's in hockey. And I think there's a benefit to that because, there's just a natural understanding of the game that comes along from that. And I think Cole has that. And it's unfortunate he got hurt at the end of the year and ended up having missed that time because, he was really starting to consistently reach that level of playing, that all-around game that was so important to this team. And I still think that I'm curious, he's 4 years into his career, so you feel like he's been around for a long time. He's still 21 years old this season. A lot of 21-year-olds are still playing college hockey or still playing in the minors at that age. And he's got 4 years of NHL experience under his belt. But that also means his game still has the chance to grow going forward. And so, I remember when he was drafted, people talked about his shot and his ability to score. And we've seen it in spurts here, but I'm curious to see, is he a guy that can reach that next level? I think it's in him from a scoring standpoint. And because he is still so young, you kind of think, oh, is he just the player he's going to be, 15 goals, 35, 40 points, and play a 200-foot game and play good defense and be physical and things like that when he needs to be. But I think there's still more in there. And I'm really curious to see if he can get there because that was kind of what he was billed as coming out in the draft, was a guy that had the ability and the shot to score 20 to 25 goals in a season. And if he can do that and combine it with the full 200-foot play that he has, then I think you've got something there. So, that's probably the challenge that was issued to him by the coaching staff at the end of the year, was to become that player. But he's just a hockey player. He's and if he's your number 3 center, I think you're in pretty good shape. And especially, like I say, I think that gets a little overlooked is just how much more room he has to grow. Say the average 21-year-old has not played 250 or whatever it is NHL games.
300 games, yeah.
Yeah, he's almost to 300 games and he's 21 years old. So, but that just means, you see hockey, that 23 to 25 range is kind of when they hit their best stride. So, if he keeps growing his game the way that I think is still there, you can see him become an even better version of what he is. And he's one of those core guys that you were right that they're building around that I think sometimes gets overlooked a little bit, but is a key part of the whole equation and really was someone they depended on in a lot of situations this year and came through in those situations.
Yeah, I remember seeing he got the quote unquote hard matchup in a lot of games. He did it more so the season before, but he gets the McKinnon matchup, he gets the McDavid matchup, he gets the Crosby matchup, and it frees up space for basically every other line. Which is, if you're again 21 and you're getting that matchup against Sidney Crosby and you're holding your own, that bodes pretty well.
Yeah,
for going forward, I feel like.
Exactly.
I want to kind of wrap up. Obviously, we talked a little bit at the beginning about, Don Waddell and free agency, and the Blue Jackets have a bunch of cap space. Big summer for the Blue Jackets. Important summer. What can you tell us about, and I don't expect you to kind of blow all of the organization secrets here on the podcast, but what do you get kind of a feeling about are they going to spend big on one guy? Are they thinking about getting, a couple of mid-tier guys? what do you think the plan for the Blue Jackets is this summer? And what do you think this team needs to do to take that next step to become a playoff team next season? Because I think that's the expectation now.
Yeah. Don't worry. They haven't given me any of the secrets yet. So,
no secrets.
No secrets yet, but they have to be a better defensive team. I mean, if we look at it, they set a franchise record for goals this season. They've got a bunch of talented offensive players. Really, if you look at the top 9 forward-wise, it's pretty well figured out going forward. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not going to make any moves, but you feel, if you look at the roster, those pieces are kind of set. But, they were, again, not one of the better defensive teams in the NHL. They were better, certainly. They were more structured. They kept the puck out of the net more this year. But they still weren't good enough to be a playoff team. And, again, they set a franchise record. They were the best 5-on-5 scoring team in the NHL. Scoring isn't the issue, but they gave up too many goals, and that's why they're not playing hockey right now. So I think they have to get better there. And, defending is a team effort. So it's not just the 6 defensemen you put out there and the goaltender. But, I think if you look at the weakness of this team, that, there was times where they still gave up goals too easily. And it's something that they've consistently done for the past 4 or 5 seasons. And so if you want to be a playoff team and then have success in the playoffs, you have to be a better defensive team. And so I think that's something they're going to have to look at as they try to make this team better. I don't know what they're going to necessarily do. I think from the defensive core aspect of it, a key question that has to be answered is, are they able to re-sign Ivan Provorov and Dante Fabro? Both sides have said in both of those cases there are interest there, but you still have to come to an agreement. So if they sign those guys, then your defensive core, you have a better plan of what you're going to be able to put together there. And if they don't sign those guys, then that maybe makes free agency a focus where you have to address those needs and those holes that are now there, because you've lost 2 guys that were top 4 defensemen for you this past season. So, and then, the goaltending situation, Don Waddell said, that, they could go into next season with the same group, but they might, also, that also maybe implies maybe not. I think it's something that they have to look at. Elvis was a much better goalie this year. Don Waddell said a couple times, he kept us in games for most of the season. I think from the fan standpoint, a lot of people are going to look at his struggles down a handful of games down the stretch and judge his season by that. But I think if you look at the full season, he was a much improved goaltender. But, consistency continues to be an issue. I mean, I was looking at, there was a number, I think it was 19 games where he gave up 2 or less. There's 12 games where he gave up, I think, 5 or more. And that's probably too many.
Real feast or famine season for Elvis, I feel like.
Yeah. So, you have to make a decision there. Do you want to try to add to the depth there? What are you going to do with Jet? Because I think Jet clearly proved at the end of the season that he deserves to be on this roster next year. He's on a 1-way contract, so all indications are he's going to be on this team next season. So, you've got to at least look at everything from a defensive standpoint to make this a better team, because that's just the, if you look at it on paper, the numbers are there. The clear weakness of this team was that they still gave up too many goals. And so I think that's something they're going to have to look at, start from there. There's obviously, tweaks all up and down the lineup. You always want to keep getting better everywhere, but to be a contender, that's where they have to start. And so I think that's where, at least if I'm them this offseason, I'm looking at it. How do we get better at that area? And if you look at the teams that are consistently good, especially come the playoffs, they're teams with big, rugged defensemen who make it hard on the other team. And, the Blue Jackets have a great, guy Zach Werenski. You can build your defensive core around him. But, if you look at the big, sturdy guys that thrive when you get down to this type of season, you've got Erica Branson, but no one else really fits that mold. So maybe that's a direction they look to kind of add to that depth and get better there. But I guess time will tell. And I said a lot of it depends on what happens with Fabro and Provorov. But I think if you're them and you look at the way the roster is constructed, figuring out the defensive side of the puck is probably where they start this offseason.
For sure. I am quietly hoping for a reunion. I guess I say quietly. I talk about it on the podcast all the time, so not that quietly. I would like a reunion with Vladislav Gavrikov. And I know that everyone always wants.
Fingers crossed. It would be great. I think he's exactly what they need.
I would love to have Gavrikov back on this team. I was very upset when they traded him, and I get it. But also, I think that he's exactly what this team needs. So we are crossing our fingers here at Locked On Blue Jackets for a Gavrikov return. It's going to be a big summer, either way. And if people want to kind of keep up with the Blue Jackets, if people want to keep up with your work, I assume we're going to be getting loads of content from you throughout the summer. Where can people find that? Where can people find you online, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's going to be a fun off season. So follow along on Twitter. I guess they call it X now, at Jackets Insider. Or I have Instagram as well, Jackets Insider. That's more sights and sounds and things like that. So there won't be as much posting there in the summer. But, we always have a lot of fun on there as well. So and I hope to use that more going forward to kind of talk hockey with fans. I did some Instagram lives at the end of the year, maybe do some more of that, especially as they make some moves to kind of talk to the fan base, things like that. So, yeah, those are the 2 main places you can find me, or just bluejackets.com as well. But, yeah, as you said, I'm looking forward to seeing, I think now that Don has that year under his belt, I'm excited to see how he goes about this offseason with this roster and with this cap space. So I think it's, once we start getting into June and July, it's going to be a pretty busy time around Blue Jackets land.
Yep, it's gonna happen before we realize it. But thanks for coming to chat, Jeff. I had a lot of fun, as I always do.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow, I believe we will have another exciting guest for you. We're going to be talking to Will Scouch about the Blue Jackets prospect pool. Obviously, a lot of the big guns have now graduated, but there are still some gems in Cleveland, in the CHL, in the NCAA, in Europe, all of that good stuff. So we're going to catch up with a friend of the show, Scouch, and we're going to talk about all of those guys. Should be fun. So make sure you come and check that out. But thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. I've been Jeff Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter, and email me if you want to at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. I accept comments, I accept questions, I accept criticism sometimes. But like I said, tomorrow, friend of the show, Will Scouch, going to be coming and talking all things Blue Jackets prospects. So until then, make sure you stay locked on.